Better Preach, episode 100, Celebrating a Milestone, by hearing from you. Welcome to Better Preach, a podcast for Catholic leaders on developing and delivering great Catholic talks. I'm your host, Ryan O'Hara, a Catholic speaker who specializes in parish missions and parish retreats. And I'm so excited to join you on your journey of communicating the true, the good, and the beautiful. Well, we did it, folks. Episode 100. I am so grateful to all of you who on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get podcasts have been downloading and pressing play for the last couple of years. And we've made it to episode 100. And today I wanted to kind of flip the script or turn the tables or whatever kind of analogy you want to use. I want to hear from you. And that's what we did last week. I sent out a call asking for folks to get in touch, share kind of their stories about how the podcast has impacted them. And I have 7 great messages to share. And so today I'm going to play those messages. I'm going to comment a little bit on each of them. But I'm just so grateful for all of you, those of you out there who are teaching and preaching in the trenches, in schools, in parishes, in neighborhoods, in conferences, in homilies, wherever it may be. My hope in this podcast has been to accompany you in this sacred call. I wanted you to help sort of bring us into episode 100, and that's what we've done today. And I'm so excited to share each of these messages. As usual, I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to hear your thoughts about where the next 100 episodes ought to go. Please reach out at ryanohara.org/betterpreach. There's a contact form there that sends me an email. That makes my day. You can also reach out on Apple Podcasts or Spotify by leaving a rating and written review. And finally, as usual, come and say hi on Instagram at Better Preach. Without further ado, let's get to you and your comments. I'm so excited to share it today. Let's get into it. One of the biggest challenges of podcasting is the asynchronous feedback. Again, my podcast isn't, winning any sort of download awards or anything, but I see how the audience has grown over the years, but it's not like Pints with Aquinas or, anything that Father Mike Schmitz touches where there's just, a deluge of feedback just because it has reached so many ears and eyes and so on. But I wanted to flip the tables here and invite you to share your thoughts on the show. And in a sense, for us to have a dialogue. My goal with the podcast has been to play a part in the renewal of preaching in the church. And this first message comes from a good friend of mine, actually, a school administrator and teacher here in the Twin Cities. I'd love for you to hear what he has to say.
Karl Hendrickson here. I am a teacher and school administrator at St. Agnes School in St. Paul, Minnesota by day. And in volunteer ministry, my wife and I run a program of formation for young married couples through a local lay Catholic family community. One of the episodes, When You Preach, it just reminds me that when I'm on the microphone in front of a group of high school students, just leading an assembly, a convocation, I have an opportunity to give testimony. So your podcast has done a great job of keeping me plugged in with my head in a space of thinking about preaching. My favorite takeaway overall was from the episode with Abe Gross, when Abe said, simply have something to say. If you're going to be on the microphone, have something to say. And so being reminded, whether that's as a school administrator and teacher or in our program of formation for married couples, we want to bring something new, something fresh, something that's come from the Holy Spirit. Thanks for all you do. Love the podcast. Always plugged in. God bless.
Thanks, Karl. What I love about this is he's a science teacher, so he's not teaching theology, but a school administrator may stand up in front of the group. And that's not the typical place that we think the gospel, the good news of our salvation, is shared. A lot of times, folks in those roles, even in Catholic schools, may not consider any content of faith. They just have a job to get done. They have announcements to make or whatever it may be. But I know, being a dear friend of Karl's, I hear his heart and I know his heart. And I know even in those situations, yes, he has administrative tasks to get done and things to move ahead, but there's always this spiritual element. And this is a great example of times and places that we don't always think are ripe for the gospel. So often we play Holy Spirit and we sort of cancel out the everyday opportunities that are presented to us. And he has not done that. And so I love that this podcast has helped him in those kinds of moments and those kinds of opportunities. I didn't see that coming, and I love being able to celebrate that. Next up, we have a great message from a Catholic speaker and Catholic podcaster. Check out what she has to say.
Hey there, my name is Megan Copeland, and I am the host of the His Beloved Catholic podcast, and I'm a Catholic speaker in Austin, Texas, and I discovered Better Preach near the beginning of this podcast when my good friend Paul J. Kim was on, and I went back and I listened from the beginning, and you guys, this is exactly what our church needs. I loved the most recent episode with Father Mike Schmitz, and I keep telling everyone everywhere I go, you've got to listen to this, because he talks about comparison, and comparison is something that the enemy is going to try to pull speakers away from doing what God's called them to do. And he's going to try to do that by making them look right and left instead of looking up to him. And so to see that even Father Mike has dealt with that in his past gave me a lot of peace. It gave me a lot of just strength and courage to go out and do a speaking event that I was a little bit afraid of this week. And I shared it with everybody I could because I thought everyone needs to hear this. Keep doing what you're doing, Ryan. The church needs more of this and more speakers and more preachers in our church. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Megan. That is so true. What struck you from Father Mike's interview, what struck me as I was going through it. Father Mike has been a friend of mine for some years, and I thought we'd be able to go deeper because of that. But I didn't anticipate that he was going to be so open, so vulnerable, so honest about the struggles of comparison, and even, as he said, envy of other Catholic speakers. And he even named who that person was. He was talking about Monsignor Shea. And it just was such a powerful moment. It humanized Father Mike, but it helped me feel comfortable, like you said, Megan, in my own skin as a speaker. This is a challenge that's just consistent with being a human being. Incredible. That was an incredible moment. And again, I think there have been so many beautiful opportunities on the podcast, hearing from folks that we've heard on stages, but off those stages, there's a humanizing element that happens in these interviews. And I've been so grateful to host so many and to hear their stories when they don't have the microphone. Next up is a beautiful message from a religious sister in Florida. Can't wait for you to hear what she has to say.
My name is Sister Nicole, and I am a Salesian sister of St. John Bosco, currently serving as a high school theology teacher. And I remember one episode from Dr. Swafford, and I remember the piece of advice that he gave when we're teaching scripture or tradition to always give a little application and a way for young people to integrate this into their lives. And I know for me, the other day I was teaching about Our Lady of Bonneau and how Marietta's dad was the first one to return to the sacraments. And so I challenged my students to invite their parents to go to Mass if they don't already, and to be the instrument of the Lord in their family's life. After reading their journals the following week, I realized that really resonated with them. So my biggest takeaway was in preaching and in teaching to just give people ways to integrate their faith into their everyday life and into their relationships.
Thank you, sister. Yes. First of all, awesome story. I love that somehow this podcast had the kind of impact that enabled you to encourage high school students to invite their parents who maybe don't go to Mass to come to Mass. And that resonated and maybe started something that who knows where that's all going to land. So first of all, it's an awesome story. Thank you so much, sister, for sharing it. But, oh man, this has been such a passion for me. If we don't make our talks applicable, they end there. And that's never the goal. Dr. Swafford certainly talked about that, but also Michael Gomer was an excellent episode on that topic. If you want to go deeper into that issue in particular, what he has done and how he has thought about it is particularly good. This has been just one of those core elements that I think is so crucial. And this is a great example of how something so simple could actually have a really meaningful impact in a person's life and in other people's lives as well. So thank you, sister, for sharing that incredible story. Next up, we have a message from a director of evangelization in a nearby diocese here. And he hits on one of the most central ideas that we've talked about many times throughout the podcast. Check it out.
Ryan, Chris Hurtubise from the Diocese of Superior, congrats on episode 100. Your podcast has been such a blessing to me, and I know so many other people as well. One podcast that I recall from early on that has been really helpful for me was with Chris Frank, talking about how to structure a talk fruitfully. He gave 5 words to build every talk around that I've literally used almost every talk since. So those 5 words are me, we, God, you, and we. And I really, really appreciate that structure, especially the we part of the first we of figuring out what's the key tension that this talk is designed to resolve and provide insight into. And then the God part, what does God's revelation tell us about that tension? How can we follow his lead? Thanks for the great work, pal. Really appreciate you and all you're doing to serve the church. Cheers.
Thanks, Chris, for chiming in. So grateful. Chris is a dear friend of mine who serves as the director of evangelization in the Diocese of Superior, just kind of north and east here from the Twin Cities. And I'm so glad that he brought up this particular idea. The structure, me, we, God, you, we, of talks. Chris Frank talked about it. A few others as well talked about it in previous podcast episodes. That, of course, comes from Andy Stanley and his great book on preaching called Communicating for a Change, if you haven't checked it out. Well, true confession here. That particular structure has been mentioned so many times, I've actually stopped including it in episodes. So I think 2 or 3 times I have literally edited that answer out. Can I tell you guys that? I've done that because it just was like a broken record, and I was always wanting not to be a broken record. So this has come up so many times. It's been such a transformative template. And I think more than anything, the template itself is brilliant. But what it convicts me of, or what it shows me, is that templates like that can be helpful. And maybe you've got a template that really helps you that's different from that. But when you're staring at a blank page and you've got like this blinking cursor or a blank legal pad and you've got a pen, it really helps to start somewhere with kind of a rough outline of how you generally put talks together. I just know that staring at a blank page can really be debilitating. So for me, thinking through a good template, and this certainly is as good a template as there is, can really help us put talks together a bit more quickly. We don't have a ton of extra time. Most of us aren't professional speakers who this is the only thing that we're doing. We're putting talks together in the midst of our very busy work lives, very busy home lives, very busy lives, period. And anything to help get us closer to a bullseye more quickly, count me in. And I think a template like this can really help. But next up, we hear from our neighbors to the north. A Canadian Catholic coach listens to the podcast. And just a shout out for all of those listeners outside of the U.S. I'm so glad that you're listening. Thanks so much for chiming in. Check out what she has to say.
Hi, my name is Nikki, and I am the creator of Canadian Catholic Coach. I came to Better Preach to hear about the highlights and the behind-the-scenes experiences of speakers because as an audience participant of so many conferences, retreats, and parish nights, it all seems so glamorous. Like you get paid to fly around the country or the world to talk about Jesus. What I received instead has been so much richer. Each episode is a reminder of the absolute need for deep humility and obedience. of tending to your own garden of family and parish, as well as ensuring there is integrity with the life you lead on stage versus home. My most eye-opening episode is 84 with Marcel Lejeune. He's open and funny, and the conversation was so authentic, just about the reality of speaking, from loneliness to bed bugs to missed flights to getting paid. I went ahead and read the article too, and was deeply humbled. Thank you so much, Ryan, for your incredible work. God bless.
Thanks, Nikki. So grateful that you listen along. Yeah, me too. Like that episode, that conversation with Marcel Lejeune was really a good one. Episode 84, Why You Probably Shouldn't Be a Catholic Speaker. And this is one of Marcel's gifts. He's a bit of a contrarian, and I think that's part of his gift. And he's also experienced it. He's been essentially a full-time Catholic speaker for a number of years. And he's just been really honest about kind of the things you don't see. And again, it kind of takes the glamour, kind of the shine off of it. And from my experience too, it's a lot of hard, isolated work. And I'm generally traveling by myself and away from my wife and family and so on. And so there's a lot of things about it to not like if you're doing it more full-time and it's one of the main sources of income for you. So loved that episode got a shout out because it's well deserved. But what she's also alluding to, again, is the humanity of so many people that we just see this snippet on stage and we hear these polished talks. And right there, that's kind of the nub of what motivated me to take the approach that I did with the podcast, which was to start with interviews and do a behind the music, behind the mic or before the mic or whatever, with speaking and with speakers. And really just wanting to listen, to learn, to keep asking questions, to draw out what the experience of communicating the gospel and doing it at a really high level, what does that look like? Mostly in terms of preparation before you get the mic. We've had some great conversations around what to do with the microphone, but the most interesting pieces of conversation over the last couple of years have been all of those kind of real things, prayer and preparation, and all the hard work that goes into bringing a great talk to life. So, Nikki, thanks so much for shining a spotlight on that episode, but that principle in general. That's been really powerful. Next up, I want you to hear from a youth minister from Syracuse, New York. He might have my favorite comment. Check it out.
My name's Nick Longo. I'm a youth minister in the Diocese of Syracuse, New York, and I'm the founder of the Apostolate Sent Parish. My favorite episode of the Better Preach podcast, it's not necessarily an episode. I think it was just a challenge that Ryan gave on the podcast. He gave a challenge that has impacted me and my ministry so much, and it was to create worksheets for your talks that you give to your audience to follow along, to engage with. I was really hesitant to do it, and when I did do this in my ministry, it's transformed so much, and it's been one of the most impactful things to the audience. That has been one of the most lasting things that I've really taken away from the podcast. So I just am so grateful for the Better Preach podcast, and I think anybody who listens to this will proclaim the gospel more effectively. So God bless you, Ryan, and thank you for doing what you do.
You're welcome, Nick. Thanks so much for sending in this message. I have to say, like when I heard it, there was some fist pumping. I love this. I love this so much. You guys, this is so nerdy. This is total insider baseball stuff. But no joke, one of my goals with something like a worksheet, a well put together, well designed handout, is like a Trojan horse that keeps the material with people. And if they've taken notes on it and kind of made it their own and they slip it into their Bible, it goes with them. That is the goal. The goal of the talk isn't to stay in that room or in that church or in that classroom. The goal of the talk, any talk that we're giving in the Catholic faith, is that it would be portable, that it would go with people and somehow find its way into their lives. And I think a worksheet, both in terms of, gosh, you hear how passionate I am about this? I love this stuff. But a worksheet has two powerful uses. One, if it promotes good note-taking, then that's a reinforcement in the moment. But if they take it with them, literally, it goes with them, they'll have a better shot at looking at it again. Taking it with them is the goal. So thank you so much, Nick. So grateful for you and for sharing how impactful something as simple as creating great worksheets for your talks has been in your ministry. And Nick is not only a youth minister, but he also is leading an apostolate called Sent Parish, where he is equipping parishes and dioceses to be effective in the ministry of evangelization. Check it out. Next up, we end with a beautiful message from a teacher and leader of the Catholic Biblical School Ministry in Michigan. Check it out.
Hi, my name is Colleen Vermeulen, and I teach, which of course also means preach, in weekly parish sessions and online with the CatholicBiblicalSchool.org ministry. I first started listening to the podcast back in 2024 to those shorter episodes where Ryan would break apart a particular element of preaching, and I immediately started sharing them with some of our other Catholic Biblical School Ministry teachers because it was the exact kind of stuff we were always talking about when we gathered for our own formation. Then I started listening to some of the older, longer interviews, and wow, what great food for thought. My favorite light bulb moment was hearing Jim Beckman, in the final 10 minutes of his episode, reflect on the negative impacts of living in a time where any adult faith formation content can be found on really well done videos. We've been quietly talking about this among ourselves, but it wasn't just something you could say aloud because it's such a divergent idea right now when people are drawn to whatever the latest and greatest video series is. But Jim's words, along with the exhortations from Marcel Lejeune and Gomer about the importance of being in the trenches, doing adult faith formation talks on a regular basis in parishes, where you can have those incarnational relationships, where a speaker isn't a big famous name, but a local witness. It's motivating for us in our ministry to know we're not alone out there and we are doing something of importance.
Thank you, Colleen. This is a great place to kind of wrap up because the world is shifting. The world is changing. We thought that the video series thing is going to be a derailer, let's say, for the local witness. And I think we're largely finding out that no, that there's a complementary role that great video series can play, but nothing will ever replace the power of a person from that local community to stand up and give witness to God moving and acting in their life. But we also know with the video series is one thing, but what about AI and what that's doing? Talk about depersonalizing a message. And this is going to be the next frontier of challenges that the church is going to need to confront and understand what kind of role should AI play in terms of teaching and preaching. And to say as a sort of preview, that's something that I'd like to explore more going forward and talk about. We haven't talked about it almost at all. And I think we're going to be talking about it more and more. What role does something like AI play? But Colleen, I'm so grateful for your message, and I'd love to share a link to the CatholicBiblicalSchool.org ministry, and where applicable, I'd like to highlight apostolates or websites that you might check out from the folks who called in. So take a look at show notes, and if there is anyone that you would like to get in touch with, particularly their apostolate, I'll leave that in the show notes if you'd like to check that out. Thanks for making it all the way to episode 100 with me. I'm doing this to bless and to support you in your incredibly important work of teaching and preaching the gospel. Thanks to everyone who shared their feedback on the show and was featured today. I'm so grateful to put your voices forward because I'm doing this for you and to support you in this life-changing work of teaching and preaching the Catholic faith, of sharing the good news with anybody that God puts in front of you. That is our hope here at Better Preach. We have millions of choices when you listen to podcasts. Thanks for press and play today, and we'll see you next time, episode 101. Peace.